So hello everyone, good day. I hope you guys are having a good day so far. This is Alzen, and today we're gonna talk about the ethnocentrism and relativism, their difference and similarities. But before we're gonna further proceed, let's go with the objective first. Now, the objective of the lesson is that by the end of the lesson, you'll be able to first is define ethnocentrism and relativism. Second is change how you see other culture, and lastly, stop the practice of prejudice of the other culture. Now let's proceed to what is ethnocentrism. Now, when we hear the word ethnocentrism, it directs our thinking that ethnocentrism is being egoistic. Now, this is actually true because ethnocentrism judging one's culture with the basis of their culture. It, it is a form of bias where we tend to immediately judge other culture as bad or wrong based upon their actions if their values are not aligned with our own beliefs. Now, ethnocentrism is a practice where we tend to judge other culture just because it is wrong in our own culture. For example, we see someone doing bad. We say, oh, you're doing it wrong because according to our values, this is wrong. So you should do this and this. So ethnocentrism forms a bias and a judgment based on our own culture. Next is part of ethnocentrism is the belief that one's own race, ethnic, or cultural group is the most important, or that some or all aspects of its culture are superior to those other groups. Some people will simply call it cultural ignorance. Now, ethnocentrism creates the feeling of superiority and inferiority with the other culture. This is because we think na, oh, our culture is better than your culture, so you should follow our culture. So it creates a supremacy, a superiority. Now, ethnocentrism often leads to incorrect assumptions about others' behavior based on your own norms, values, and beliefs. Now, this is actually harmful because in extreme cases, a group of individuals may see other culture as wrong or immorals, and because of this, they may try to convert, sometimes forcibly, the group of their own ways of living. War and genocide could be the devastating result if a group is unwilling to change their ways of living cultural practice. Now, since ethnocentrism creates a supremacy or a superiority, we tend to say nga, oh, their culture is wrong. We should try to correct that one. Now, this is harmful because sometimes if we think that our culture is superior, we tend to save them from being wrong just because it is wrong in our culture. We tend to say nga, oh, their culture is wrong. We should try to change that one. And this is harmful because by the time that they are not willing to change, there will be force. So they are forcibly changed. And if that group is still not willing to change, there could be a devastating result such as war and genocide. Next is although ethnocentrism has a negative connotation, but at the same time, ethnocentrism proves that each culture is unique from one another. That's why we try to change that one. Um, we don't want we don't want them to be different. So this ethnic distinction and subdivision serves to define each culture or ethnicity unique cultural identity. So ethnocentric individuals judge other groups relative to their own ethnic groups or culture, especially with the concern of language, behavior, customs, and religion. Now here's a quote by William G. Summer. According to him, that ethnocentrism is a technical name for the view of things in which one's own group is the center of everything and all others are scaled and rated with a reference to it. So it basically means that we believe that our culture is the center of everything. That's why if we tend to see if we tend to see someone doing immorally wrong with the basis of our culture, we tend to scale them. Oh, those are immoral. So we should try to change that. Next is ethnocentrism. So people born into a particular culture that grew up absorbing the values and behavior of the culture will develop a world view that consider their culture to be the norm. So if people then experience other cultures that have different values and normal behaviors. They find that though patterns appropriate to their birth culture are not appropriate for the new culture. However, it is very uh, it is very difficult for a person A to understand person B's culture. Hence, person A's culture is already embedded since birth. Now, it is very hard for a person to understand a specific culture with the basis of that culture, because growing up we already have our own culture. So it's very hard for us to understand their culture if we don't do further research, or if we don't disregard our own culture just to understand their culture. Now, to further broaden our knowledge about ethnocentrism, let's do some examples. Example is the bikini. So, Western countries, it is normal for girls to wear dresses that are short, skirts, cut sleeves, clothes. Where in India, even though now it is coming to be accepted, those wearing such as clothes are often judged to have loose character, and it is said that girls should always be dressed in clothes covering their bodies, as this is ideal and thus they must not attempt to copy the West. Now it goes hand in hand. Same goes with the West. The West also think that India, or wearing of the clothing of India is not that modest. So they tend to say, oh, don't wear that one because that is wrong in our culture. Next is the use of chopstick. Now, Western people often laugh when Asian people are using chopstick and said why these Asians are trying hard, when in fact forks are so much easier and so much better. So it is actually a living sentiment that Western people are trying to judge us just because they have forks. So next is ethnocentrism may not, in some circumstances, be avoidable. We often have involuntary action towards other person or cultures, practice, or belief, but these interactions do not have to result in horrible events such as genocide and war. In order to avoid conflicts over culture practices and beliefs, we must all try to be more culturally relative. So, what is cultural relativism? Now, cultural relativism tries to counter ethnocentrism by promoting the understanding of cultural practice that are unfamiliar to other cultures, such as eating insects, genocides, or genital cutting. So it is the principle of regarding and valuing the practice of culture from a point of view that the culture, and to avoid making hasty judgments. So cultural relativism is the complete opposite of ethnocentrism, because this promotes to instead of judging one's culture, we tend to understand them. We tend to cast them as judge. We tend to cast our judgment with understanding. Now, an example of cultural relativism is food choices. Food choices are a good example because people have become more tolerant of food forms, culture that that are not their own. In the past, people were more likely to find some type of food unacceptable, but now they are more likely to not judge others based on their food choices. So absolute cultural relativism indicates that whatever practice or whatever practice within a group, no matter how weird and dangerous they appear to be, should not be questioned by other culture. So it promotes that even though it is dangerous for a culture to do that one, it should not be questioned by the other culture, so that it avoids uh, misunderstanding. So next is now, according to Franz Boas, the father of American psychology, civilization is not something absolute but is relative, and our ideas and concepts are only true so far as our civilization grows. Now, he also argued that one's culture may mediate and thus limits one perception in less obvious way. He understood culture to include not only certain taste in food, art, and music or beliefs about a religion. Now, according to him, um, culture is not limited to how we perceive things, but it also goes beyond those ideas. Here is he defined that the totality of the mental and physical reaction and activities that characterize the behavior of the individuals composing a social group and collectively and individually in relation to their natural environment, to other groups, to member of the group itself, and of other individual themselves. Now, with the understanding of culture, uh, it confronts anthropologists with two problems or with two questions. First is how to escape the unconscious bond of one's own culture, which inevitably bias our perception of the reaction to the world. Second is how to make sense of an unfamiliar culture. Have you ever uh, question this pod na how can we how can we escape our own culture in order for us to understand, and how can we make sense of an unfamiliar culture to understand that one, because we have no prior background to that one. Okay, so yeah, that guys concludes the discussion for today. This is Alzen Gabutan, and thank you for listening. I hope you have learned something. Goodbye.